Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cop Talk, where we discuss all things law enforcement, the good, the bad, the funny. My name is Daniel Habshi. I'm your host. I'm a former police officer, and joining me today is my good friend, Mica. How are you, sir?
I am doing fantastic.
Good.
How are
So,
you?
yeah, I'm doing great as always. I just wanted to bring Mike on today because he is an expert on leadership, management, and all things police related as far as that goes. And I'd like to talk to him about his experience there and a little bit about what he's up to now. So, Mr. Lunt, I just want to get started here. Tell us how you became a cop.
I was not supposed to be a cop. My parents were not supportive of that growing up. That was on their list of things I ought not do. Um, and anyway, I actually was in a PhD program up in Michigan and at Eastern Michigan University, and I moved into an apartment, and I still had Oklahoma license plates on my vehicle. I am from Oklahoma. Don't take that against me. I'm now back in Oklahoma, and I feel good. But I had Oklahoma license plates on my car, and because in Michigan with all the snow, you have assigned parking. And anyway, I parked next to this silver SUV that ultimately was driven by the woman that would become my wife. And so we parked next to each other. We lived next to each other, and we met one another and got started. So she actually got into a program down at Texas A&M, and so we moved to the city of College Station back in 2005, 2006, and that's where I started my law enforcement career. College Station Police Department for the city, and absolutely amazing place to learn how to do this thing we call policing. College Station was very, very understaffed when I was there, and for the bulk of my career, I worked beat nights in Northgate, the bar district, and it was an amazing place to learn how to be a cop. I worked many home Aggie football games where it was me and about 90,000 drunk people. And so that's how I got started into this thing.
It's funny you say that because same for me. I did not plan on becoming a cop, right? And I remember I was a young man. I was in IT world, believe it or not, and I happened to take a test, and I got offered this job for half the money I was making. I was like, yeah, why not? Let's give this a try, right? And I remember the same
Right.
feeling. I worked in a place where there was like 9 bars on one block, and somebody said, they go, "Are you old enough to be out here?" And you were it, and you had to learn how to, not only break up fights, but not get hurt and deal with so many different things at once. So I can totally understand. Take us a little bit now. You left as chief of police. Can you run us through your career a little bit and the steps you took on the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So College Station, amazing place again to learn how to do that. And after, while I was there, I was very fortunate to have a lot of opportunities kind of thrown at me. And I was really fortunate to have some kind of once in a lifetime just things happen career wise while I was there. I was able to apprehend with a good buddy of mine, Stephen Schulman, who I went to the academy with. We were able to apprehend a serial rapist that was just ravaging the community, and that was amazing. I can remember, in the briefing room, there were some detectives that at the time had been, working for 20 plus, near 30 years, and they walk up and they'd be like, "How did you get to do that?" And just fresh out of the academy. Um, but anyway, that was a great place. But there were limited career opportunities for both me and my wife. She is very successful professional on the research and academic side of things. And so in 2010, we moved up to the DFW area. She kind of had a dream job there. And I was very, very fortunate to get hired by the Plano Police Department here in Texas. And Plano, it's a CALEA flagship accredited agency. It is really internationally renowned for its reputation, its policies, and there I was again afforded a lot of really great opportunities to promote rapidly and really start developing some supervision management and leadership skills. And when I started out as a formal leader, I sucked. Um, I was awful, really. And I mean, the guys that were on my first crew, I they will attest to this. Um, Luckily, I still maintain some good relationships with those guys, and they ultimately gave me a second chance. But that was when I really started learning how to practically apply, this art and science of leadership, and then how supervision and management kind of intertwine. So, officer, promoted sergeant, promoted lieutenant. As a commander, I had a tremendous opportunity in the specialized positions I served in. So I was a patrol administration lieutenant, which sounds bad, sounds kind of yucky and officey, but there really wasn't a whole lot of administration to it. I got to supervise some amazing units and work with some great folks there. I built up an impaired driving enforcement program with some other folks, and that was a lot of fun. And then I was fortunate to be placed into the Homeland Security and Training Lieutenant's role. And so there, I really started, it was my job to partner with all of the private sector entities within Plano and make sure that their safety and security policies and our response protocols were meshed up well in case there were any critical incidents that happened. And then also I liaised a great deal with our faith-based communities in Plano for the same type thing. And just formed a ton of great relationships there and really saw how the public sector and the private sector can work together. And that was very, very cool. That position also prepared me well to serve as a chief. And in 2019, I kind of, there was like a Y in the road. Plano is a civil service agency, and the way that it currently, the way that it worked then was that in order for me to promote, I had to wait on a deputy chief to leave, or an assistant chief position open up that I might get selected for, and that just wasn't really in the cards for any time soon. And I loved my job. I mean, it was amazing. But an opportunity came up to serve as a chief over in the city of Forney, which is a smaller suburb of Dallas over out on the east side of the Metroplex. And I really started on that process thinking, this will just be a good experience for me to go through. First time I apply for a chief, and we'll just see how this goes. And then the next thing I knew it, I had a job offer from a city manager. And, being a chief was incredible. I absolutely loved it. There, the ways that supervision, management, leadership come together, and the fact that you have a gajillion bosses as a chief. I considered all of the personnel, both sworn and civilian, at the Forney Police Department my boss. Obviously, the city manager was my boss on paper, but the community, the faith-based leaders, the city council, and all those folks want different things. So dealing with those kinds of differences and so forth was a real challenge, but it was something that I really enjoyed. And I was fortunate to develop a really positive relationship kind of with the three key stakeholders, and that being the department, the community, and then my colleagues in city administration. And really, really enjoyed it. So then we had this Snowmageddon thing in February of 2021. and the city manager and I got sideways on what was the appropriate response to that, and I felt he put first responders in danger and the community in danger. Ultimately filed a grievance against him, and he fired me in retaliation for that. And
Okay.
the city council fired him. So that was the end of my professional experience in law enforcement. Still served as a reserve after that, and the local sheriff's department here just picked me up as a reserve so I can continue to give back. But that's the short and sweet of my overall law enforcement career.
I guess politics are the same, no matter whether you're in New York like me, or the funniest part is it was probably 2 inches of snow, right?
No,
No, I'm just kidding.
this was bad.
Okay.
This was, if you or anybody watching remembers all the headlines that Texas made in February of 21. This shut the state down, and yes,
I'm just
an
picking.
snow,
I'm just picking. Yeah.
absolutely does that. But yeah, this one was bad, where we were just covered in ice, and it never got above freezing for several days, and Texas is just not prepared to deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. All right, so that was awesome. I love hearing about everyone's background, getting into it and their way up. But the main thing I want to talk to you about is you have such an academic background and you can explain things really well. So many people are out there and talk about leadership, and there's all these sound bites, right? You got to do this, you got to do that, and I laugh inside because, a lot of times a leader is somebody, when we go to a call, who does everybody kind of look at for a second, right? There's these unwritten rules on leadership on calls and on the street, right? Can you describe to everyone what your perception or your take on leadership is as a whole? Because you explain this really well and in a big term. What do you think an effective leader is? What does he possess?
So, and I appreciate that, Dan. There's my conceptualization of supervision, management, leadership has developed over 20 years, and I am, number one, above all else, a constant student of leadership. As much as I teach about it, I practice it, and so forth, I am constantly learning. I've got a gajillion books over here that I read, re-reference, listen to, but I'm constantly still learning. So here's the Mica Lunt philosophy of these things. Number one, I think that supervision, management, leadership are three distinctly different things. And I believe that they build off of one another. And the place where you have to start is supervision. I believe that if you cannot supervise well, you cannot manage well, and you certainly cannot be a good leader. And so what is supervision? And this is a cop podcast, and my brothers and sisters in blue, I love you more than anything. I truly do. But supervision is about making sure that stuff gets done the right way. And if you have policies, it's about making sure that the policies are followed. And if they're not, then there's a whole gamut of potential, what we call corrective action to take to fix that. What do I mean by that? Well, let's suppose that I'm a sergeant or a corporal and I'm out on a traffic stop or investigation, call for service, whatever, and I see one of my folks engage in something that's not consistent with policy. There's a whole host of choices available to me right then and there on how to deal with that. Obviously, if it's life and death, blah, 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 you might have to dive in, and there's not a lot of opportunity for what I would call a soft, very dignified approach.
Right.
But most of the time there certainly is. And ultimately, what I'm going to get to is that to fix something, you as the supervisor have got to have a conversation with a person and say, hey, let's walk through X. Tell me what is that perspective? Is the first thing. So there, you're making sure that you as the supervisor and the person that went through it, that your concept of the facts are at least aligned. Because if you don't see the facts in the same way as that person, then the rest of it is going to be screwed from the get go.
Right.
So you sort of walk through it like that, and then ultimately from that conversation, you're going to say, okay, you realize that when you did this, behaviorally based, okay, not attitude, not nothing. There's three things you can talk about in supervision. That's conduct or behavior, attendance issues, showing up on time, appropriate use of leave, all that good stuff, and then performance, whatever kind of performance standard that you might have set. So, when you did X, that's not consistent with how we do things in XYZ. And, can I have your commitment that we're not going to do that again? Yes, absolutely. We're good to go. Awesome. I am very confident that you will succeed. And I will follow up that with an email and say, hey, on this date, we got together and chatted about this. Thanks a bunch for doing that, and send it. Cops hate that. They hate to get that email.
Right.
And folks, it's a best practice. And here's the deal. If you meant what you said, then that's going to be the last email that you get. And it's just an email. It's not discipline. It's not anything but the lowest level of corrective action. And for the supervisors that are listening, if you don't do it, you're not doing your job, because you don't know if that's going to continue or not. And if it does, then you have a starting point. So that's my concept of supervision, and how to kind of address one piece. Then that builds into management. So again, you're a sergeant, you're a corporal. You may have a crew of folks working the same shift, depending upon the size of the organization, all that good stuff. Maybe you're a lieutenant, you're a commander, and you've got multiple units that you are responsible for. Management is ensuring that everything is as efficient and as effective as possible, that there's a true team approach to things, that this unit is supporting this unit in the way that they need to. One of the biggest sort of telltale issues of a poorly functioning organization, whether that be a police department, sheriff's department, or a for-profit organization in the private sector, is if there's something that needs to be done and the response is, that's not my department, you need to talk to so-and-so. That right there is a signal of misalignment, that there's not a common unifying vision or a shared vision, as Kouzes and Posner would say in the leadership challenge. That's one of the fundamental things that you do, is you get people aligned on a shared vision. And so even if it's not your job, technically, as cops, lots of times you'll say, well, the badge says, whatever city, but then it almost always says the state of whatever. So folks have to take true ownership in, providing whatever that ultimate goal is. And so as a manager, you're looking at how different people on the same team relate and interact, how this unit that requires support from this unit over here is able to request and get that, and how resources are allocated, all that kind of stuff. And then there's leadership. So supervision and management are really all about various, I'm going to use the term control measures, okay? If you don't do X, I can take Y corrective measures, all the way from sitting down and having a chat with you to firing you, and everything in between. Management, you can reassign people, you can change resource allocations, you can adjust this, that, and the other thing. That's all stuff that you as the supervisor or manager can do. Leadership is a gift that is given by a willing follower to some specific person. That could be you because you're in a formal leadership role and they respect you. You've earned that respect and you've demonstrated, hopefully through like servant leadership applications, that you truly care about them, and you put them first and so on and so forth. But they make the choice to willingly follow a leader. And really that's what a leader is. Adolf Hitler was a leader. Abraham Lincoln was a leader. People willingly followed those two individuals toward some, greater in
I
terms
know.
of
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
so that's leadership. And when you talk about like work productivity and how much that somebody brings to the table through control measures, supervision, and management, you can get somebody to perform, let's say, at 70%, but you will never get that extra 30 unless they willingly follow the direction that you're trying to go in. And in my experience, having gobs of battle scars on my back, the way to get there is through servant leadership. And I say I have this document that I created years and years ago, and it's been refined a lot. And it's my leadership philosophy and expectations. And one of the things that I say in there is that I absolutely will use servant and transformational leadership when at all possible. Sometimes, a person just won't, they won't come to the table. And that's unfortunate, and you have to go strictly supervision and management there. But I have found that the absolute most successful piece is to get to where folks will willingly say, you know what, I buy into what you're doing, and I'm going to give you everything that I can. And the way that I've always gotten there is I give them everything I can. I mean, in every leadership position that I've held, formal leadership position, I have put my heart and soul into it. Trying to improve, trying to understand each person that I have the privilege of working with. And, all those words are super intentional. I had somebody that I was working with, they reported to me, but they were watching me craft an email one time, and they were looking at, like autocorrect and the suggestions of the words that were coming up. And they're like, the words that keep popping up are always we, our, us, stuff like that. They were like that. I see a lot of I's, and, whenever I'm typing, and I'm like, I try to be inclusive. It's not about me. It's about what we as a whole are able to produce. So that's my, leadership management and supervision in a nutshell explanation.
That was great. And like I said, so in police work, a lot of times you're number one on the sergeant's list, you get promoted. It doesn't mean you're going to be a good leader, and it just doesn't. And we all work for people. That was not the case. Now, on a lighter note, you were a young leader, doing not so great, right? I want to hear a story of where you really screwed up, and you're like, I can't believe I just did that. And something where you screwed up, but you learned from it and you got some valuable information.
So, depending upon who's watching this, I'm going to say two words. They're going to be like, oh, yes. So book club. I did this thing back when I was a sergeant in Plano, and I'd read this book that was kind of revolutionary at the time. If you or any of your viewers and listeners follow Chip Huth, who is a SWAT commander in the Kansas City Police Department, and he came into the SWAT team in Kansas City that had just tons and tons of complaints. They were known as rough and tumble, blah, blah, blah. And he completely reversed that. And he was a SWAT guy. I mean, big, tough SWAT guy. But he completely reversed that by saying everything that we do is going to be safe. It's going to be tactical. It is going to be cutting edge, but it is also going to be done with dignity and respect. And so I was like, yeah, this is amazing. And so I bought every one of my folks a copy of this book. I gave it to them. And I was like, we'll read a chapter a couple weeks or whatever and talk about it. And so anyway, I do this, and I had a big crew, like, I don't know, 10 or 12 people. And so I got some, feedback from some of the folks that, hey, some folks are just not behind this and they're not reading it and whatever. And so on the first day, when we were supposed to all come together and talk about it, I handed out these pieces of paper, and it was an integrity test. And I basically said, I asked him to sign, I did or I didn't read. And I mean, it all went up in a ball of fire. Yeah. Do we have to fill this out? I'm like, yeah, you do. And then, I hadn't, as a new leader, I didn't go to my lieutenant, right, captain. I didn't have any support from them, and I was just out on a limb. And anyway, book club flopped drastically. That's so now I have discussions all the time with people about what other thought leaders in the realm think. But that was it, and it took me a long time to recover from that.
Because you're trying to trap them, and they felt like you're trying to trap them. They were probably calling their union reps. You know what I mean? Right after that,
100%.
Sergeant. Yeah. So
100%.
All right. I don't want to keep you all day, Mica. Tell everybody what you're up to now. You have a consulting company. What are you doing these days?
Yeah, absolutely. So my wife and I started a consulting business years and years ago, and it was just kind of a side hustle while we were in our professional careers, and had the opportunity, me personally, I had the opportunity to serve as an expert witness a couple of different times for some clients. And as I got command staff level experience and then chief level experience, and I served on a lot of assessment centers and then actually organized some of my own, I was like, what, I could maybe sort of expand this. Then I went over into the private sector for a while, and when I came out of that, it really just where I'm at in terms of my life, where my wife is, and so forth, we had the opportunity where I could really devote 100% full-time attention to Lunt Consulting. So that's what I've been doing now for the past few months, and it's just really taken off, and I'm loving it. So what my firm does is we do everything that I just talked about in terms of leadership management supervision training. We will do investigations, both misconduct investigations and also like malfeasance in office investigations for, and unfortunately, elected officials sometimes don't do what they're supposed to do, stuff like that. Expert testimony on police procedure. I have a really strong background in impaired driving related stuff, so that kind of thing as well. And then I've also partnered with another guy by the name of Mike Wilson, former chief, and actually served as a city manager as well in the DFW area. And he has a firm called T2 Consulting. And so we partner together a lot on now executive placement. So suppose that a city is looking for a new city manager, police chief, things like that. We do that. And our approach is different than a lot of the firms that are out there. Most of the time, what those places will do is, if it's a city manager search, they'll say, hey, city council, what do you want? And they'll listen, and then they'll go, okay, we're going to do the same thing that we do for pretty much every other city and hunt for you what you've told us you want. And that's it. We start with a comprehensive assessment of the organization. And that includes a survey that goes out to all city staff. We have interviews, focus groups with members of the city staff, with members of the community, also the council, and so forth. So we get this comprehensive picture of what the organization is really like. And we do a SWOT analysis. strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then we work with the hiring authority, in this case, the city council, and we put together a job and a description where we focus on fit. So not are we just looking for a city manager, but we're looking for a specific city manager that understands these needs of the organization, that has this style, that will breed hopefully long-term success for the city. Because there's gobs and gobs of turnover in these executive leadership positions, and it's just very detrimental to organizations. A lot of unnecessary tax money spent. So that's us in a nutshell. I, like I said very early in this podcast, am a strong supporter of all my brothers and sisters in blue. You are more than welcome to reach out to me if you feel like there's anything that I might be able to help you with. Promotional preparation. I've sat on a ton of boards. I've promoted a ton of people. I will help you look different than your colleagues that are applying, and give you some tips and trades there. As long as you promise me that you will always be a student of leadership, and don't just get the title and think you know it all. Because let me tell you from experience, you don't.
And you got to sign that slip that you read the book.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Mica, I appreciate you coming on. Everybody, I'll put Mica's website and information in the description below. Thank you for joining us all. And until next time, please like and subscribe.